All right, so today we are continuing in the Bhagavad Gita portion of the Bhakti Shastri course, and we are beginning a new chapter, the final chapter, actually, and we're going to cover verses 1 and through 22, and this is the 18th chapter is kind of a summary of the whole work. And so Prabhupada says, so we'll get started. We're gonna because it's a review. There's oftentimes not a lot of commentary that Prabhupada gives, and we'll be hearing echoes of things we've heard in the previous chapters. So we were moving a little bit more swiftly than I had originally thought we would. So we'll see how it goes. Looking to go through 1 through 22. So, verse 1. As Arjuna said, O mighty armed one, I wish to understand the purpose of renunciation, the word here is tyaga, and of the renounced order of life, sannyas. O killer of the Keshi demon, master of the senses. He uses, so as with many chapters, it begins with a question of Arjuna to Krishna, and he's bringing up these topics that have been discussed previously. This notion of sannyas and of renunciation have been mentioned in previous chapters, and so that's why it's going to turn into a bit of a review. And here in Srila Prabhupada's purport, he says, actually the Bhagavad Gita is finished in 17 chapters. The 18th chapter is a supplementary summarization of the topics discussed before. And then he says, in every chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna stresses that devotional service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the ultimate goal of life. This same point is summarized in the 18th chapter as the most confidential path of knowledge. And he seems, here in the next one, he says, in the first 6 chapters, stress was given to devotional service. And he quotes from the last verse of the 6th chapter, Yoginam api sarvesham. Of all yogis or transcendentalists, one who always thinks of himself, of me within himself is best. And then he says, in the next 6 chapters, pure devotional service and its nature and activity were discussed. We talked previously how the Bhagavad Gita is seen by many elevated personalities as 3 sections of 6 chapters. And in the first 6 chapters, there's mention of bhakti, of devotional service. It's not as overt, but Krishna is giving all these different, we call it the yoga ladder, different types of yogas. But even from the beginning, there's elements of bhakti incorporated in. In the 2nd chapter, he said that you have to be connected with me. You have to, otherwise that's not going to work. The yoga ladder can't work without some elements of bhakti. We heard and understood. In the 3rd chapter, they talk so much about sacrifice. So it says that work for Lord Vishnu has to take place. So there's a little bhakti, and then of course in the 4th chapter he reveals a whole lot about himself. So there's bhakti sprinkled through there, and then at the conclusion of those first 6 chapters of the Yoga Ladder, when you reach the epitome of the Yoga Ladder, Prabhupada quotes from the last verse, Yoginam api sarvesham. Of all yogis or transcendentalists, one who always thinks of me within himself is the best. So the top of the Yoga Ladder is bhakti. So that supports Prabhupada's statement that bhakti is there throughout the Gita. It's what he says in every chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Lord Krishna stresses that devotional service under the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the ultimate goal of life. And then in the middle 6 chapters, that was really exclusively bhakti, and the different types of bhakti were mentioned. And then there was a focus on pure devotional service, as Prabhupada mentions here in the purport. And then here, he says in the 3rd 6 chapters, knowledge, renunciation, the activities of material nature, and transcendental nature, and devotional service were described. And so we heard a lot about who we are, and we learned that from the 2nd chapter, that we're spiritual beings, and we're in an alien environment. And that alien environment was described in various ways in those 6 chapters. It was kind of looking at the same thing from these different angles, walk around and take a photograph from a different angle and have different points of emphasis. And then we were looking at how something alien and transcendental gets stuck in this environment and what causes us to be stuck in that way. Why do we remain in material nature? And that was, and so we heard about the different modes of material nature and how they hook us in and keep us attached, and how the attitudes that we have when we are in certain modes of material nature either help us to go upwards or downwards or stagnate. And so we got a lot of different knowledge, which will help us. It says it can either, and repeatedly Krishna emphasizes again that bhakti is the way to break free, and from that. And so the chapters can lead people to bhakti if they're not already bhaktas, and if we are bhaktas already, that knowledge can really help us to apply the principles of devotional service. It helps us to understand how we're bound and how we can get out and what the circumstances are. It really helps us in our practice. So Prabhupada says it was concluded, and this is at the end of the 17th chapter. So Prabhupada says, everything is concluded by then. So he talks about he quotes a verse from the end of the 6th chapter, which is the end of the first group of 6 chapters. He talks, then the whole middle 6 chapters is all about bhakti. And then here he says, since actually the last chapter is kind of an add-on, he quotes from the end of the 17th chapter. He says, it was concluded that all acts should be performed in conjunction with the Supreme Lord, represented by the words Om Tat Sat, which indicate Vishnu, the Supreme Person. And that was the final section of chapter 17, was talking about how we transcend. And again, it's dealing with devotion. So again, this is and again, of course, at the end, we all know at the end of the 18th chapter, Krishna is going to really nail this again. That's the whole purpose of the Bhagavad Gita. And then he says the 18th chapter, this is from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. He says the 18th chapter speaks of the 3 types of sannyas, jnana, and karma, defines liberation, and indicates bhakti as the highest secret of all. Okay? So that was the introduction to the chapter. Now Krishna responds to Arjuna's question. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, the giving up of activities that are based on material desire, kamyanam karmanam. So kamya means, desire or kama, is what great learned men call the renounced order of life, sannyas. And so here he mentions the kavya, the learned. He's going to give his own opinion and summarize things later on. But here he says, great learned men say that you giving up the activities based on material desire is sannyas, and giving up the results of all activities, sarva karma pala, the fruits, pala is fruits, so that the results of them, to renounce those things. That means renunciation, tyaga. So he gives a little definition for each. There's a little different angle on each one, and eventually we're going to find out that there's one essential thing that encompasses both. But Prabhupada says in his purport, he says, the performance of activities for results has to be given up. This is the instruction of Bhagavad Gita. But activities leading to advanced spiritual knowledge are not to be given up. This will be made clear in the next verses. So Prabhupada's giving us a little peek ahead also. He says, in the Vedic literature, there are many prescriptions of methods for performing sacrifice for some particular purpose. This is the Kamya Karmanam. There are certain sacrifices to perform to attain a good son or attain elevation to the higher planets. But sacrifices prompted by desires should be stopped. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Baladev Vibhushan, they call that Kamya Karma. Things that certain types of they're pious activities and sacrifices. They're described in the Vedas, so they're not harmful. But these are done at certain times when you have a specific desire that you want to fulfill. Kamya karma is And so Prabhupada says that these should be stopped. However, sacrifice for the purification of one's heart or for advancement in the spiritual science should not be given up. Because there's a dispute sometimes. And we ran across this in the 3rd chapter. If we are spiritual beings in a material environment and we're somehow bound to it, does not every action that we perform within it increase the bondage? And shouldn't we stop everything? But Krishna is going to say otherwise, and Prabhupada is giving us a hint of what Krishna is going to say. And Krishna has already mentioned this so many times before. He's always been a proponent of action, the right kind of action with the right mentality, and he's going to repeat that here in this chapter. And then Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he says to renounce, and nyasa is he's quoting from the verse, at the very root, sam, so he's giving the derivation of sannyas, activities performed for fulfilling personal desires, kamyanam karmanam, is called sannyas. So he's saying that all of the activities, sannyasi, this is Prabhupada saying, a sannyasi should renounce all activities that can produce some kind of karmic result, fruitive result. So especially we're talking about this kamya karmanam, these type of activities. I want a son, I want to go to heavenly planets, I have a specific material desire, and I can undergo a certain sacrifice or pious activities in order to attain it. And so those activities they shouldn't even do those activities for a sannyasi. And then he says, this does not mean that one should reject daily obligatory activities, nitya karma, such as the sandhya worship. So there are certain things that everyone is supposed to do. There are certain sacrifices that are done every day to counteract all of the... so there's unknown sinful activities that people do in the Vedic culture. So what does it say? That by sweeping you kill so many creatures. By grinding spices you do it. I'm trying to remember the other ones. By even having water in a water pot, you do it. There's 5 of them, 5 different things. You're always causing... Breathing is another one. You're always committing some kind of violence to other beings, very tiny ones. And so there's certain sacrifices meant to atone for that sort of thing. And that's also so the worship at the different sandhyas, different morning, noon, and evening, sunrise, and just before sunrise, noon, and just after sunset, or at sunset. So he says chaga means, Vishwanath is continuing, means that one should give up the results of all activities in performance of actions with personal desire, whether they're kamya karma or in performance of obligatory actions, nitya karma, rather than to give up those activities completely. So the way he sees it is that a sannyasi has to renounce all of the activities that can produce some kind of material improvement or result. But has to keep on doing, and this is like Prabhupada indicated in the purport, they have to keep doing things that are purifying, like the nitya karmas. But he says for the non-sannyasis, for the householders and things, they can even perform the kamya karmas, something for a son or for the heavenly planets, as long as they don't want those results. So maybe it's it's a sort of thing where these are commonplace things to do. I think there was a time where Lord Chaitanya performs the sacrifice for his father, goes to Gaya, and so that there's some so he said that he's saying that for a householder they can even perform these kamya karmas as long as they don't really have that kamya, that desire. It's just kind of, they do it as kind of a routine thing. Maybe it's just the tradition. And Prabhupada will kind of indicate later on too, although he stresses primarily that we should give those things up. He mentions that in early stages, people can do things if they're not very advanced. And so what we're going to see here is that there's kind of different levels of advancement, like we saw in the early chapters, where people become progressively more renounced and filled with knowledge. And so then their activities can change based on their adhikar, their level of advancement. Okay, so that's how he takes it, Vishwanath does. And in the third verse, Krishna says, some learned men, and so now he's giving these varying opinions here. He's going to give his own. Some learned men declare that all kinds of fruitive activity should be given up as faulty, yet other sages maintain that acts of sacrifice, charity, and penance should never be abandoned. So this is what Prabhupada was alluding to in the earlier purport, that we should keep doing the things that are beneficial. And Prabhupada says, and he says, although animal killing in a sacrifice is recommended in the Vedic literature, the animal is not considered to be killed. The sacrifice is to give a new life to the animal. Sometimes the animal is given a new animal life after being killed in the sacrifice, and sometimes the animal is promoted immediately to the human form of life. But there are different opinions among the sages. Some say that animal killing should always be avoided, and others say that for a specific sacrifice it is good. And Vishwanath, he identifies this verse. He says, the Sankhya philosophers say that all activities described in the scripture, because of being defective by inclusion of violence or other bad qualities, should be given up completely. And on the other hand, the Mimamsakas say that activities such as sacrifice cannot be given up because they are prescribed by the scriptures. So that's the differences of opinion. Again, usually there's that notion of not performing any activities at all is somehow helpful. Persons who think that, they don't realize, as we'll see again later on, that they are unable to do so. You can't stop all activities. So better to do the right thing in the right way if we want to get free from the reactions. But some people think that way. So that's what Prabhupada was he's saying. Some people think that because there's some violence done, that sacrifices shouldn't be done, or penances shouldn't be done. And the other ones say, no, it's prescribed in the scriptures, therefore it's got to be good. And that's the real issue. And then here's now Krishna says. Now he's talked about what learned people say, and now he's going to say what he says. And so of course his judgment is definitive. O best of the Bharatas, now hear my judgment about renunciation. O tiger among men, renunciation is declared in the scriptures to be of three kinds. He's going to describe these three kinds starting in verse 7. In Prabhupada's purport, he says, although there are differences of opinion about renunciation, here the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, gives his judgment, which should be taken as final. After all, the Vedas are different laws given by the Lord. Here the Lord is personally present, and his words should be taken as final. The Lord says that the process of renunciation should be considered in terms of the modes of material nature in which it is performed. This is going to help us to understand why certain types of renunciation are not so valuable, and understand what type of one is effective. Help to clear up these misconceptions of what the learned people are saying. This is going to help us. In 5, acts of sacrifice, charity, and penance, this is Krishna's opinion here, final opinion here, are not to be given up. They must be performed. Indeed, sacrifice, charity, and penance, this is yajna, dana, and tapa. Penance, they purify even the great souls. So indeed, sacrifice, charity, and penance purify even the great souls. That's what he says. So we shouldn't go so far as to renounce the things that help us to get out of the entanglement, thinking that, because we're already entangled, actually, right? And if we just stop acting, you can't get untangled because the mind is attached. We have there's no way. And Krishna said in the 3rd chapter, right, if you can't stop the senses of action, You can't stop acting, but even if you somehow could, then the mind is going to dwell on material things. So Prabhupada says in the purport here, he says, sannyasis should never associate with women, but that does not mean that one who is in the lower stages of life, a young man, should not accept a wife in the marriage ceremony. All prescribed sacrifices are meant for achieving the Supreme Lord. Therefore, in the lower stages, they should not be given up. Similarly, charity is for the purification of the heart. If charity is given to suitable persons, as described previously, it leads one to advanced spiritual life. So here's an indication that depending upon our level of advancement, some activities can be performed that other people might not, who are more advanced. The sannyasis wouldn't obviously do that. But for persons on a lower plane, they can continue doing their pious activities, but they can do it with a different mentality, the tyaga, not wanting the fruits. Whereas as people who are more advanced, they may not want to deal with anything that even has a different purpose. And Baladev Vidyabhusha, in his commentary, he says that the purification comes from the knowledge that arises from sacrifice, penance, and charity. And especially with sacrifice, and some of the sacrifices included penance and charity in chapter 4. We saw how those performances of sacrifice caused knowledge to arise, jnana to arise. We discussed that quite a bit during the yoga ladder. That first of all, by acting, doing one's dharma without wanting the material results, that automatically began to awaken a certain level of jnana, help people to realize themselves as a spirit soul. And then when they take other actions, because your dharma, it only covers so much of your life. The kshetras are only fighting so much, they're only doing so many things so much. So then they take other, like sadhanas, perform different other sacrifices and things. People can do that. And that increases the level of knowledge. So it says that's what happens, is that and the knowledge means realization, first of all, of the soul, and then of Krishna. In 6, all these activities to be performed should be performed without attachment or any expectation of result. So this is the crucial thing here. All these activities should be performed without attachment or any expectation of result. They should be performed as a matter of duty, O son of Pratha, that is my final opinion. And the words here are sangam, that Prabhupada, he translates it as association in the word for word, and attachment in the smooth translation. And Tyaktiva Palani, renouncing the fruits, the results. So this is the real thing. Depending upon your level of realization, you may give up certain things if you're more advanced and more intensely engaged in the process. But the main thing is, whatever you're doing, do the pious thing, but do it without this attachment to the results. And don't be attached to the action. Do them as a matter of duty. We'll understand that as when Krishna explains, starting in the next verse, what renunciation and the mode of goodness is. So it's not that we don't have so much. It's not that we have great faith in those activities, but it's more that because we're supposed to be taking. We feel that the wise person feels that the Vedas are coming from the Supreme Lord, and that by following them, that's the right thing to do. And if they don't, but those activities don't have independent power. The karma mimamsakas, they think that that if you simply do your karma, this is what Krishna was trying to convince his father Nanda Maharaj about. When the Govardhan Lila takes place, right? He said that they're worshiping Indra because they're raise cows and are do agriculture. So we need the rain, so that they're worshiping the rain god Indra. And Krishna says, just do your karma. Indra even reigns on the oceans. He reigns on the rocks. If you do your karma, he has to reign. He's not independent in that way. So it says that one shouldn't be attached to those activities, but they're your duty. They're given in the Vedas, and so you do them, and you don't want the result, and that's the right way to do it. And we'll understand that's an integral part of bhakti. And here Prabhupada says, although all sacrifices are purifying, one should not expect any result by such performances. In other words, all sacrifices which are meant for material advancement in life should be given up, but sacrifice that purify one's existence and elevate one to the spiritual plane should not be stopped. So Prabhupada is emphasizing that point again, to avoid the ones that are specifically meant for material enjoyment. And for bhaktas, in particular, that's it doesn't make sense. We've taken shelter of Krishna, as we heard already in the middle chapters, that Krishna promises to take care of us. So what is the need, for doing these things that try to obtain the necessities and things of life separately? So why even bother with those things? So he's, Prabhupada's emphasis when his commentary is on us, bhaktas, devotees of Krishna, and how we should apply it. Although it's from what Vishwanath says and what he says in other places, it seems like it might be okay if somebody's on a lower level to perform the kamya karmas and without the result. But otherwise, Prabhupada, just stay away from that stuff. We're not looking for material results. Why would you do something that, even without attachment, why would you do something that's meant for that sort of thing? And then Prabhupada says, a devotee of the Lord should accept any kind of work, sacrifice, or charity which will help him in the discharge of devotional service to the Lord. And he's kind of he's commenting on this verse and kind of taking a look ahead at the next one, and the next ones. Giving up the misconception of being the doer, sangam chaktva. This is, Vishwanath gives a little bit different a translation of sangam chaktva. Prabhupada calls it, he says that sangam is attachment. Giving up the attachment. Giving up the misconception of being the doer, sangam chaktva. So this is a different conception that Vishwanath has, but it fits in with what Krishna is going to say later on. And it's going to be part of what happens. He says, and also giving up the quest for results, and one should give up those actions. Giving up the idea of being the doer and giving up seeking results is tyaga, and this is also called sannyas. This is what Vishwanath is saying. And Krishna is going to explain this further, like that. He's going to bring in this notion of not being the doer as an integral part. Vishwanath is seeing that already in this verse, and Prabhupada seems to just think it's a little bit different. The differences of opinion amongst the acharyas are both considered to be correct, but I think Vishwanath is anticipating a little bit what's going to come further. And so now Krishna is going to begin to explain. Is going to begin to explain the three types of renunciation, three types of tyaga. And the first one, that starts out in the mode of ignorance. Prescribed duties should never be renounced. If one gives up his prescribed duties because of illusion, such renunciation is said to be in the mode of ignorance. Okay. So it says that somebody may say not do what they're supposed to do, okay, because they don't understand. Prabhupada says work for material satisfaction must be given up, but activities which promote one to spiritual activity, like cooking for the Supreme Lord and offering the food to the Lord and then accepting the food, are recommended. And then Prabhupada also says, it is said that a person in the renounced order of life should not cook for himself. Cooking for oneself is prohibited, but cooking for the Supreme Lord is not prohibited. And then he says, similarly, this is interesting, this is referring to his own experience, similarly, a sannyasi may perform a marriage ceremony to help his disciple in the advancement of Krishna consciousness. If one renounces such activities, it is to be understood that he is acting in the mode of darkness. So it's interesting, Prabhupada is mentioning how, if he even though he's a sannyasi and shouldn't be dealing with marriages, he's speaking about himself there, shouldn't be dealing with marriages, but because actually he's serving the needs of his disciples. His whole business as a sannyasi was to help people become Krishna conscious. That was his real duty, is to help them. It says if he disregards his real duty, that's in the mode of darkness. And so he says you have to look at things a little bit more intelligently. The other thing that can happen, and this is Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he says that this ignorance, mohat, that's being spoken of here, is ignorance of the meaning of the scriptures. And the result of such tamasic tyaga is ignorance, he says. So it comes from ignorance, and just like we've heard about the modes of nature, if you're in a particular situation, if you're acting in a certain mode of material nature, it reinforces that mode in you. So out of ignorance, they don't understand what they're supposed to do. We heard before that somebody in the mode of ignorance doesn't know what's supposed to be done and what's not supposed to be done. And so then, because of that, they act whimsically, as Prabhupada says. And so it looks like they're renouncing. They may look like they're renouncing these activities, but it's not done with any intelligence or knowledge. And actually, it's keeping them from taking actions that are going to help them to become liberated. Baladev says that Baladev Vijayabhushan says that those in ignorance give up these duties because they falsely believe that they will cause bondage when in fact they produce knowledge. We heard about that somebody in the mode of ignorance thinks that the wrong thing is the right thing and the right thing is the wrong thing. So by mistake, so that also covers. So there's ignorance of the scriptures, Vishwanath Chakravarti says, and Baladev is kind of talking more about these persons who, like we mentioned before, that think you should give up all activity. If we're spiritual, we give up all material activity. But you need to. The example is oftentimes given, right, of removing the thorn with another thorn. So our material attachment has to be removed. We have to take some action to remove it. We can't just stop where we are now, because it's already there at a very deep level. That karmashayan, deeply rooted desires for material activities, are there. And we actually have to take some action to remove them. So it's a mistake that we can just stop. If we stop right here, stop acting, even if we could, then we remain in the situation we're in. And then in 18.8, Krishna describes in the mode of passion. He says, anyone who gives up prescribed duties as troublesome or out of fear of bodily discomfort is said to have renounced in the mode of passion. Such action never leads to the elevation of renunciation. So Prabhupada says here, he says, one who is in Krishna consciousness should not give up earning money out of fear that he is performing fruitive activities. If by working one can engage his money in Krishna consciousness, or if by rising early in the morning one can advance his transcendental Krishna consciousness, one should not desist out of fear or because such activities are considered troublesome. Such renunciation is in the mode of passion. The result of passionate work is always miserable. If a person renounces work in that spirit, he never gets the result of renunciation. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, even though one knows that performance of nitya karma is necessary, and to do it is praiseworthy, and to neglect to do it is sinful, if one rejects the action thinking it is useless trouble to the body, it is known as rajasic or passionate renunciation. One will not attain the desired result of chaga, knowledge, by doing so. We saw that, and I guess we saw a little bit of both of those two. Mostly passion and a little touch of ignorance in Arjuna's desire to become a beggar in the early part of the Bhagavad Gita. It was so horrifying for him to participate in the battle with all of his family members and worshipful superiors, that he was just left a mess. He said his skin was burning, the bow was slipping from his hand, he was dizzy, he just wanted to run. It created such a visceral reaction in him. So he knew he was supposed to do his duty. That's why he asked Krishna for guidance. But it was just too terrible, and so he wanted to renounce it in that way. And that kind of, and then also there was a little bit of ignorance mixed to it, because he was trying to convince Krishna that following his duty was actually going to be a causes of misfortune. So he gave some arguments that Krishna rejected. The main thing, though, was that first came just the aversion to it, that this was just something terrible to do. And so sometimes, so when Prabhupada mentions at the beginning, he says one should not give up earning money out of fear. Sometimes we we'll do things like that. That if we're going to we're spiritual people, we want to do spiritual things, and but it's something that's hard to do some of our regular duties, and so we want to renounce things like maintaining ourselves and things like that, which can be troublesome, and that's allowed if one's immersion in spiritual consciousness is sufficiently great. But what happens if we try to just renounce things because they're difficult, and not because our Krishna consciousness is awakened so great that we can't be anything but absorbed in direct devotional service, then you don't get any benefit from that. You're attached. You're attached to comfort, which Krishna told Arjuna right in the beginning he has to get rid of. Matra sparshas to kaunteya, that it's natural that the sense data, our sense experience is going to sometimes be pleasant and sometimes be unpleasant. He says you have to learn how to tolerate that. It just goes. He says it's natural, like the seasons, it changes. And you have to not be affected by that. You have to do the right thing in spite of that. That produces spiritual advancement. But if we're under the control, he says we're not supposed to become under the control of attachment and aversion. So if we're doing things because they're pleasant and avoiding things because they're unpleasant, then we're not dealing with the issues that we have, the attachments and the aversions, and we're being controlled by the material nature. So one has to do the duty, pleasant or unpleasant, and if one is advancing, someone can, somebody who's a legitimate sannyasi, they're dedicating all their time to Krishna conscious activities, direct ones, and that's the kind of renunciation. We have the ultimate example in the 6 Goswamis, where they're just so absorbed in Krishna consciousness that they hardly have time to eat, hardly remember to eat or sleep. They're just so absorbed in it. So there's no harm in that sort of renunciation. That's beautiful. But if we're attached and we're giving up things not because the absorption in Krishna consciousness is drawing them away, but we think, oh, this is kind of painful, I can use Krishna consciousness as an excuse. So that happens sometimes to us. Then Krishna gives the proper type of renunciation here. He says in the 9th verse, O Arjuna, when one performs his prescribed duty only because it ought to be done, and renounces all material association and all attachment to the fruit, his renunciation is said to be in the mode of goodness. Okay. Again, Sangam, Prabhupada talks about it. He translates it as association in the word for word and attachment in the smooth translation. So performs his prescribed duty only because it ought to be done, and renounces all material association and all attachment to the fruit. His renunciation is said to be in the mode. So doing the right thing, right, regardless of whether it's pleasant or not, and not doing it motivated out of some material desire. This is the essential part of this renunciation, and the essential part of sannyas. Krishna really basically says the same thing. In essence, that's the essence of both of them, is that you do the right thing for the right reason. which means just for spiritual advancement, not for a material result. That's the mode of goodness. And Prabhupada says, prescribed duties must be performed with this mentality. One should act without attachment for the result. He should be disassociated from the modes of work. A man working in Krishna consciousness in the factory does not associate himself with the work of the factory, nor with the workers of the factory. He simply works for Krishna. And when he gives up the result of Krishna, for Krishna he is acting transcendentally. So it's interesting how he means association. He doesn't think that that's something, an integral part of his existence. It's just his duty. Performing it doesn't have faith so much in the activities or faith in the sacrifices or the penances. But there's duty. And so he does them. And gives up the result. Vishwanath says, performing the nitya karma, thinking this should be done, while rejecting doership. He again translates that sangam as being the doer. And Prabhupada seems to kind of, in his purport, seems to be talking a little bit like that. He should be disassociated from the modes of work. He does not associate himself with the work of the factory or with the workers of the factory. He simply works for Krishna. Is kind of like that. And Krishna is going to come up and talk about the factors of action and mention how we have to not think of ourselves as a doer. This is one of the other main components of proper renunciation. So he says, while rejecting doership and desired results is called sattvic, or mode of goodness, renunciation. It is understood here that the result of renouncing the fruits and not renouncing the action in this mode of goodness renunciation is knowledge. So sometimes it's that people want to renounce, and that's either because they're painful or because they're ignorant. Want to renounce the actual action when actually we should be renouncing the fruits. That's what Krishna is getting at here. And that's the main thing. There may be some actions that are done by certain individuals in a certain level of advancement and not by others. But the main thing is whatever's appropriate for you at your position. You should do that way and do it with this mentality of not thinking oneself as the doer, so therefore not being so associated with it, and not wanting the material results from it. Prabhupada says, a person in Krishna consciousness, or in the mode of goodness, I'm sorry, I skipped over the verse here. The intelligent renouncer, this is 18:10, the intelligent renouncer, situated in the mode of goodness, neither hateful of inauspicious work, nor attached to auspicious work, has no doubts about the work. This is 10. The Prabhupada says, a person in Krishna consciousness or in the mode of goodness does not hate anyone or anything which troubles his body. He does work in the proper place and at the proper time without fearing the troublesome effects of his duty. Such a person situated in transcendence should be understood to be most intelligent and beyond all doubts in his activities. And I was wondering about the words Prabhupada uses. It's akushalam, inauspicious, and kushale, auspicious actions. And so I usually when I think of auspicious and inauspicious, something that's going to produce bad karma or something harmful. Maybe to the one's spiritual life, and something auspicious is helpful for the spiritual life, or on a lesser stage for good karma. So I was wondering about how someone in the mode of goodness, doesn't worry about whether it's inauspicious or auspicious. And but the Vishwanath and our own Garuda Prabhu, they define it like uncomfortable and comfortable. Inauspicious means uncomfortable or disagreeable, according to Garuda Prabhu. That's how the translation he comes up with. And comfortable Vishwanath and agreeable Garuda Prabhu. So it follows from the previous verse. So it's not inauspicious in that kind of sense, but whether it's pleasant or unpleasant. We talked about how the person in the mode of passion, they may reject it if it's unpleasant. And somebody in the mode of goodness does. So the Prabhupada was just using, was using inauspicious and inauspicious in a particular sense. And then Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, Akushalam means those activities which bring suffering to the body, such as bathing during the winter. Kushalam means those activities which are pleasurable for the body, such as bathing during the summer. And then Prabhupada says, he really echoes it, and he says, he does work in the proper place and at the proper time without fearing the troublesome effects of his duty. So that's, a similar thing. So that's the mode of goodness. So Arjuna, if he's in the mode of goodness, he just, doesn't mean it's pleasant for him to do it, to fight in the battle, but it's his duty, so he does it. And he doesn't do it for any material result, does it because it's the right thing. So this is familiar from the early chapters. Text 11, it is indeed impossible for an embodied being to give up all activities. So this is echoing the third chapter. But he who renounces the fruits of action is called one who has truly renounced. Okay, so this is Krishna summing up the element here. That as long as we act in ways that we want some kind of material result, and I guess either short term really or long term, especially the long term ones, then and rather than depending upon Krishna or depending upon in the persons in the mode of goodness who aren't devotees, still there's some faith in God there because God has set up the Vedic system. So one has a certain faith in the order of the world, and that somehow by performing one's Vedic duties, that one is acting in harmony with things. And so, but if one is looking for, trying to enjoy something, some positive benefit from one's activity, and that can be short term or long term, just keeps us focused on the material world. We mentioned how that we can't understand ourselves as spirits, as souls, because we're distracted by the material nature. So the more that we want a particular type of thing from it, and thinking that's going to make us happy, that will be enjoyable, that's what we want, we're keeping ourselves distracted and focused on. In the 14th chapters, guna sangyasya keeps us associated with the modes more deeply. So the idea is to do the right, keep acting, because we have to break all of the different bonds that we've created over many lifetimes in this material world, and also you accept the fact that we can't not act, but do it in such a way that it's breaking the bonds, rather than either keeping them intact or creating new ones. By being inactive, you keep them intact. By acting with a material goal, it increases the bondage. So he says this is real renunciation, renouncing the fruits of the activities. And Prabhupada says, it is said in Bhagavad Gita that one can never give up work at any time. He says, therefore, he who works for Krishna and does not enjoy the fruit of results, who offers everything to Krishna, is actually a renouncer. So we see that in bhakti, that's already incorporated. Not wanting the fruits. We want them for Krishna, not for ourselves. There are many members of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness who work very hard in their office or in the factory or some other place, and whatever they earn they give to the society. Such highly elevated souls are actually sannyasis and are situated in the renounced order of life. That's interesting. Yeah? So it's more what you do with the results. So if it's being done for Krishna, very nice. And I just quoted here in Bhagavad Gita 3.5 and 3.6. Prabhupada seemed to be echoing those things in the purport. Everyone is forced to act helplessly according to the qualities he has acquired from the modes of material nature. Therefore, no one can refrain from doing something, not even for a moment. And then, one who restrains the senses of action, so even if you could do it, but whose mind dwells on sense objects, certainly deludes himself and is called a pretender. So then the mind is the problem. We saw that in the 6th chapter. That when finally one comes to a high level of jnana, that one can actually stop physically acting. Then the trouble becomes the mind. And so it takes really serious advancement to be able to control the mind then. And the only way to get there is to act as Krishna is recommending. Act without the fruits. That leads you to the ability to be able to finally restrain the senses and then work on the mind. In Krishna consciousness, we don't have to bother with that, because we can simply act for Krishna with our bodies, minds, and senses. And there's no harm in that whatsoever. And we know how to see Krishna even in the material phenomena. We mentioned that in the 7th chapter. So 12, for one who has not renounced the threefold fruits of action, desirable, undesirable, and mixed, accrue after death. But those who are in the renounced order of life, sannyasinam, have no such result to suffer or enjoy. Now, at this point, Krishna is using this interchangeably. And that's really what he says. This is the essence of all types of renunciation, is this not wanting the fruits. Whether you're in whatever ashram you happen to be in, or whatever varna you happen to be in, there may be certain activities more appropriate and less appropriate, but you do the ones that are appropriate to your station, and you do them without fruitive results. And so that's why Prabhupada says even somebody who's working in an office or a factory, obviously those people are not going to be in the sannyas order of life. He says they're sannyasis, because the essence of the renunciation, whether you're in the renounced order of life or another order of life, is to do the right thing for the right reason, without attachment. That's what Krishna's emphasizing here, and he's emphasized it previously. And so if you don't, then you get the fruits of action. Some are good, some are not good, and some are kind of mixed together. And Prabhupada says, a person in Krishna consciousness acting in knowledge of his relationship with Krishna is always liberated. Therefore, he does not have to enjoy or suffer the results of his acts after death. The fault of not knowing, this is Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the fault of not following this process of Tyaga is described here in this verse. Those who do not renounce in the prescribed way get results in the form of suffering, of hell, anishtam, the pleasures of swarga, ishtam, he says, and the human birth, mishram, in the next life. And Prabhupada translated those things in the same way. He says in the smooth translation, Prabhupada said desirable, undesirable, and mixed. And in the word for word, though, he says anishtam is leading to hell, and ishtam leading to heaven. So Vishwanath is saying the same thing as he does. He says that mixed means human birth, and that follows the three modes we saw. So that's how it goes. Okay, so text 13. O mighty armed Arjuna, according to the Vedanta, there are 5 causes for the accomplishment of all action. Now learn of these. From here, he's going to talk about how emphasize how we have to think of ourselves not as the doer. And we'll reflect upon how he's mentioned that previously. It's another crucial factor in proper renunciation and proper action that leads towards freedom from the material world. And this is, as previously, kind of Vishwanath seemed to be seeing that being indicated earlier on, being foreshadowed by that word of Sangha. Now Krishna is going to bring it out very explicitly by showing how action takes place. So Prabhupada says, a question may be raised that since any activity performed must have some reaction, how is it that the person in Krishna consciousness does not suffer and enjoy the reaction of work? The Lord deciding Vedanta philosophy to show how that is possible. Sankhya is the word that Prabhupada translates as in the Vedanta. And then he says, the ultimate control is invested in the super soul, as it is stated in the Bhagavad Gita, Sarvasya Chaham Hridisan Nivishtaha. He is engaging everyone in certain activities by reminding him of his past actions. And Krishna-conscious acts done under his direction from within yield no reaction either in this life or in the life after death. And Prabhupada's actually, he's skipping ahead a little bit. He's anticipating where Krishna is going to go with this. That the super soul is one of the factors of action. He's getting a little head start here. And then Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, in order to establish that there is no contamination of karma when performing actions without false identification, the Lord speaks 5 verses. Okay. So these 5 verses are going to talk about the doership here and non-doership. And I thought we should take a look here at what Krishna has spoken previously in chapter 4, 4:16, 4:17, 4:18. He says, even the intelligent are bewildered in determining what is action and what is inaction. Now I shall explain to you what action is, knowing which you shall be liberated from all misfortune. So it's a tricky subject, and so that's why Krishna is going over it again. The intricacies of action are very hard to understand. Therefore, one should know properly what action is, what forbidden action is, and what inaction is. I think we've seen that here, the different modes there. One who sees inaction in action and action in inaction is intelligent among men, and he is in the transcendental position, although engaged in all sorts of activities. So he's brought this topic up before, and now we understand what it is. You do the right thing, whether it's painful or pleasant. You do it without the results, and then you're also going to do it thinking that you're not independently the doer. That's where we're coming to here. And 14, the place of action, the body, the performer, the various senses, the many different kinds of endeavor, and ultimately the supersoul. These are the 5 factors of action. Okay? These are the ones here. Prabhupada says the word adhishtanam refers to the body. The soul within the body is acting to bring about the results of activity and is therefore known as karta, the doer. That the soul is the knower and the doer is stated in the Shruti. So the soul is one of the factors of action, but not the only one. And then he says, but all one's activities depend upon the will of the Supersoul, who is seated within the heart as a friend. The Supreme Lord is the super cause. And then he says, those in complete Krishna consciousness are not ultimately responsible for their actions. Everything is dependent upon the Supreme Will, the Super Soul, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Not surprising, given Prabhupada's deep devotion, that he emphasizes, in particular, the one cause. And of course, it is the most important one. And here I was looking at... Prabhupada says Vivida, various, cha, and pratak, separate chases of the endeavor. So he listed, says, many different endeavors, the many different kinds of endeavor as one of the factors. I was trying to wonder what that meant. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says the life heirs with various functions. And Garuda Prabhu says, and the different types of various movements. So those two are related. So any type of action, coordinated action, you have to be able to move around and do it. It's a composite of many different things happening together, and so the Prabhupada calls the different kinds of endeavor, different types of things you have to do in order to accomplish a particular task. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says it's the life heirs because that's what makes the body move, and Garuda is saying it's like various types of movements, so they're all related that way. So in order to accomplish a particular task, you have to do various things. Different types of endeavors is what it means. Move around and do different things. Whatever right or wrong action, Krishna says, a man performs by his body, mind, or speech is caused by these 5 factors. Okay? Prabhupada says, the words right and wrong are very significant in this verse. Right work is done in terms of the prescribed directions in the scriptures, and wrong work is done against the principles of the scriptural injunctions. We've been hearing that in the last several chapters. But whatever is done requires these 5 factors for its complete performance. So then Krishna comes up and he says, therefore, one who thinks himself the only doer, not considering the 5 factors, is certainly not very intelligent and cannot see things as they are. And Prabhupada says in this purport, he says, a foolish person cannot understand that the Supersoul is sitting as a friend within and conducting his actions. Although the material causes are the place, the worker, the endeavor, and the senses, the final cause is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, one should see not only the four material causes, but the supreme efficient cause as well. One who does not see the supreme thinks himself to be the doer. I looked up that Krishna is also he's the material cause, because everything that functions is his energy. But then I was looking at efficient cause, because this is I think it's from Aristotle. And so I looked up online, Britannica.com, the encyclopedia. The third type of cause is the origin of a change or state of rest in something. This is often called the efficient cause. Aristotle gives us examples: a person reaching a decision, a father begetting a child, and a sculptor carving a statue, and a doctor healing a patient. So Prabhupada says that the super soul is the supreme efficient cause. He says he helps people to remind them of their duty. He's the remembrance, forgetfulness, and knowledge. So in that sense, you can see somebody reaching a decision. He's nothing can function without his sanction and action. So he's deeply involved in everything. So it says he's the supreme efficient cause. There's also the material cause. It says what the actual material that's being used, and so Krishna is also, everything is his energy. And then Baladev says, Baladev Vijayabhushan says, though the jiva's acting as the doer takes place only with the permission of the Lord and depends upon the body and senses given by the Lord, he is a fool who sees only the jiva as the doer. So when we say, we'll look here at the well-known verse in chapter 3 that we covered, the spirit soul, 327, the spirit soul, bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities that are actually carried out by the three modes of material nature. So here, this is clarified a little bit. Because sometimes we think that we don't have any part in the action at all. And if we didn't, then what would be the use of having scriptures and having rules and regulations if we're simply automatons? But we're not the only doer. And the action itself, and we really can decide what we want to do. And the whole activity itself is beyond our power. The body and the other senses and all these things are controlled by higher powers. So we can only desire to do a certain thing, really. But that's why, because we are a factor, that's why we're responsible for our actions, and why we can actually choose to do the right or the wrong thing. Otherwise, if we were no factor in action at all, we couldn't be responsible. We're just machines. And what would be the use of having scripture saying doing this or do that, because we can't make any choices. Then Krishna goes on to say that one who is not motivated by false ego, ahankrita, whose intelligence is not entangled, though he kills men in this world, does not kill, nor is he bound by his actions. Now this also should remind you of chapter 2. Let's skip ahead a little bit here. 2:19. Neither he who thinks the living entity the slayer, nor he who thinks it is slain, is in knowledge, for the self slays not, nor is slain. So this explains that in a little bit more detail. All right. So if you have the right attitude, one who is not motivated by false ego, whose intelligence is not entangled, though he kills men in this world, does not kill, nor is he bound by his actions. So again, doing the same things, doing it out of duty, that's implied here. Whether it's pleasant or painful, not wanting any particular material result from it, and doing it not thinking that you're the doer. That the actual actions have all these four other factors involved that are very important. We can't independently do them. Prabhupada says, in this verse, the Lord informs Arjuna that the desire not to fight arises from false ego. Arjuna thought himself to be the doer of action, but he did not consider the supreme sanction within and without. If one does not know that a super sanction is there, why should he act? And then Prabhupada, he gives us, the bhakti perspective here. He says, when a soldier kills under the command of a superior officer, he is not subject to be judged. But if a soldier kills on his own personal account, then he is certainly judged by a court of law. And so, the understanding here, of course, is that if we do act, and Arjuna was ultimately asked to be Krishna's instrument, that Krishna said, "You do it on my order, or at least on my desire. Follow my desire." So previously he was saying, that that if we act, doing the right thing, following with the will of the Lord, then the responsibility is not ours; it's Krishna's. We have to choose to do the right thing. One who does not have the nature of, this is Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, one who does not have the nature of ahankara, who is not thinking himself the doer, who is not attached to actions by thinking the action will give good or bad results, does not obtain reactions from karma. Prabhupada is giving us the nice, this understanding that if we're acting, when we follow the Vedic rules, we're acting under the guidance of the Lord. So whether it's direct, some kind of Krishna speaking to Arjuna directly, somehow the super soul giving us guidance in the heart, or the Vedic rules and regulations, these are instructions from Krishna. So if we in bhakti, we think that we can't act independently. We can only really act through the grace of the Lord. We do what the Lord wants, and we do it for His pleasure, and that covers all those bases perfectly that Krishna is mentioning here. And then, so avoiding karmic reaction, right? 3 steps: following dharma, or the will of the Lord directly, same thing, and doing it whether it's pleasant for you or not. That isn't considered. Not being motivated by the material results, and immediate or karmic, or not considering oneself to be the independent doer. So in bhakti we do it that way, that nothing moves except by the grace of the Lord. That if we have any abilities, if we have our bodies and our minds and everything, are Krishna's energy, even of course our very self is Krishna's energy. And so we don't have any ability to do anything independently, because everything depends upon Krishna. But we have our desire. That's what we have. And so if we act with an understanding that it's not me, and take credit for the action, that's actually what happens. You take credit for the action, and then you're entitled to the results. Krishna tells Arjuna previously, right, that you're entitled to do your duty, but not entitled to the results, because you're not really able to do them independently. How can you get credit for it? But if you insist on claiming doership, then you have to take the result. It's okay. He gives it to you. But really, you're not. And so if you're following the right path, that means it's authorized by higher authorities. You recognize that you're not able to do it independently. Your role is to wish to do it, and to decide to do it. And you're not wanting some particular personal material benefit from it, but you're doing it just because, either because it's your duty, or if you're bhaktas as we are, that we do it because that's the Lord, that will please the Lord. That's the result we want, the pleasure of the Lord. That's a desire. That's beneficial. Right? Okay. So 18. We're coming to the end here. Knowledge, the object of knowledge, and the knower are the 3 factors that. So we've covered now renunciation. Okay, that's what it means. What we do will always be according to the Vedas. What particular actions we decide to carry out or not may depend upon our level of realization and our ashram or our varna. But we do what's authorized by the Vedas, by the Lord, and we do it with a notion that we're not independent doers. Only one of the factors, in fact, only our desire really is what we can do, and that we don't want the material results from it. So that's real renunciation. So someone may be in the sannyasa ashram or the brahmacharya ashram or the grihastha or the vanaprastha ashram, and that maintains and holds true. And that's the real essence of all types of renunciation. That's why Prabhupada said even somebody working in the factory, giving up the fruits of their activity for Krishna is a sannyasi. So those two things, sannyas and tyaga, the essence of it is that. And if you mean the ashrams, some of the activities may be a little different one way or the other, but the main thing is those three things: doing the right thing, whether it's pleasant or not. Not wanting the results and not thinking yourself independent. Is that so? The initial question's been answered fully. We have had a nice recapitulation of what we heard in the earlier chapters. So those three things are very, very key for not building more attachments to the material world, but freeing oneself from them. And when we do our devotional service properly, those things are automatically done. So now Krishna says, knowledge, the object of knowledge, and the knower are the three factors that motivate action. The senses, the work, and the doer are the three constituents of action. And so he's changing the subject a little bit here. Prabhupada says, any solution arrived at before work is actualized is a subtle form of work. Then work takes the form of action. First, one has to undergo the psychological processes of thinking, feeling, and willing. Right? That involves the knower, the knowledge, and the known. And that is called impetus. The inspiration to work is the same if it comes from the scripture or from the instruction of the spiritual master. When the inspiration is there and the worker is there, then activity actually takes place by the help of the senses, including the mind, which is the center of all the senses. So this is kind of what, when we talk about being the part that we play as spirit souls in the action is really comes in the first part, the impetus. And the action itself is done more by the three modes of material nature and by the super soul, the actual activity. And now he says, according to the three different modes of material nature, there are three kinds of knowledge, action, and performer of action. Now hear of them from me. So we're getting more detail about the modes of material nature. We know that we have to act at least in the mode of goodness, but if we add bhakti, then we're trying to access purified goodness. But at least we have to have those elements of goodness present for us to be successful. So Prabhupada says in the 14th chapter, this is text 19, the three divisions of the modes of material nature were elaborately described. In that chapter it was said that the mode of goodness is illuminating, the mode of passion materialistic, and the mode of ignorance conducive to laziness and indolence. And then he points out that all the modes of material nature are binding. And we heard about that the mode of goodness binds us with happiness and knowledge. But they are not sources of liberation. Even in the mode of goodness, one is conditioned. Although it's described that someone elevated in the mode of goodness can get up to the plants of the sages. They can live through and even up to Lord Brahma's planet, and there they can live throughout the rest of the lifespan of the universe in really good association, and they have a pretty good chance of becoming liberated afterwards. But it's still within the confines of the material world and doesn't really come up to where we really want to do. And it says in the 17th chapter, the different types of worship by different types of men in different modes of material nature were described. In this verse, the Lord says that he wishes to speak about the different types of knowledge, the workers, and the work itself according to the three material modes. So we're going to cover the knowledge this week, and then we're going to pick up with the other two, the worker and the work, and next week. Try to find a place to break off. So 20 says, that knowledge by which one by which one undivided spiritual nature is seen in all living entities. Though they are divided into innumerable forms, you should understand to be in the mode of goodness. Now, what's interesting about this here is that the modes of material nature, they affect so many different things, including our ability to understand. So everything changes when we're in different modes. Our mode of understanding is the type of knowledge that you have. You can see one undivided spiritual nature in all living entities. You understand that souls are everywhere, even though there's so many different forms there. And Prabhupada says that a person who sees one spirit soul in every living being, whether a demigod, human being, animal, bird, beast, aquatic, or plant, possesses knowledge in the mode of goodness. In all living entities, one spirit soul is there, although they have different bodies in terms of their previous work. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur kind of, he says something very similar, but he kind of helps maybe removing any potential misunderstandings. When Prabhupada says a person who sees one spirit soul in every living being, there are separate souls. We know that. Prabhupada teaches us that very, very carefully. It's not that there's one soul. There's one individual soul in each type of body, but they're all the same type of souls. And so Vishwanath kind of helps to explain this. He says this verse speaks of sattvic process of knowing, seeing one soul with one form, which is indestructible, residing successively in different forms, such as human, devata, or animal, for the purposes of enjoying various fruits, which are temporary through knowledge related to action, is known as sattvic. So he's looking at this like we see, if we take one particular soul, we can see how it goes in different bursts into all different types of creatures. But it's the same soul in different creatures. And so if you know that, then obviously we know that all souls are like that. There's not a plant soul, there's not an animal soul, as Prabhupada says, no beast soul, no anything else. There's only one, there's one type of soul that can be in all different types of bodies. But there are, of course, so many individual souls that are doing that. I don't want to get caught up into some kind of Mayavadi stuff, but that's what it is. So somebody who can see that in the mode of goodness, and see that I'm a soul, other people, other entities are all souls, ultimately just like me. We talked about that in chapter 6, how somebody could see, by comparison to their own selves, they can understand the happiness and suffering of others. There's a lot of empathy there. That should bring about compassion and mercy things as well. In 1821, that knowledge by which one sees that in every different body there is a different type of living entity, you should understand to be in the mode of passion. So Prabhupada explains this interestingly, and he gives us a really, really beautiful summary of it. I think he does it in the next. He gives a beautiful summary at the end of the next verse. He says, the concept that the material body is a living entity, and that with the destruction of the body, the consciousness is also destroyed, is called knowledge in the mode of passion. So we don't really think that there's an eternal soul. That's one way. According to that knowledge, bodies differ from one another because of the development of different types of consciousness. Otherwise, there is no separate soul which manifests consciousness. That's another version of that, of the mode of passion. Or else there are no individual souls, but there is an all-pervading soul, which is full of knowledge, and this body is a manifestation of temporary ignorance, is Mayavad philosophy. Or beyond this body there is no special individual or supreme soul. All such conceptions are considered products of the mode of passion. So he's going to sum this up nicely in the purport to the next verse, so I won't say much about that right now. Then the last verse we're going to cover today, and that knowledge by which one is attached to one kind of work as the all-in-all, without knowledge of the truth, and which is very meager, the knowledge is very meager, is said to be in the mode of darkness. Oh, goodness, no chance there. In the mode of darkness. And so here Prabhupada says, one who does not develop knowledge through the authorities or scriptural injunctions has knowledge that is limited to the body. So this is the kind of knowledge that they have. For him, God is money, and knowledge means the satisfaction of bodily demands. So that's why it's very limited and meager. And Prabhupada says it is more or less like the knowledge of the ordinary animals, the knowledge of eating, sleeping, defending, and mating. Such knowledge is described here as products of the modes of darkness. And then he sums it all up. This is a beautiful little summary here. He says, in other words, knowledge concerning the spirit soul beyond this body is called the knowledge in the mode of goodness. Knowledge producing many theories and doctrines by dint of mundane logic and mental speculation is the product of the mode of passion. So he describes kind of some of those different types of speculations there in the previous verse. And knowledge concerned only with keeping the body comfortable is said to be in the mode of ignorance. So just really succinct and clear and perfect there. Description of those three. And Vishwanath Chakravarti, he says, this verse speaks of tamasic knowledge, knowledge which is speculative only. The word was a word in the verse, ahaitikam. It means usually causeless. And so he's saying ahaitikam means not with reference to any scripture, so no legitimate cause. There's a cause, bodily comfort, as Prabhupada says, but there's no legitimate cause, which would be Vedic truth. Which is so it says knowledge which is speculative only, not without any reference to the scripture, which is extremely attached to performing one material activity such as eating or bathing, drinking or enjoying with a woman, with disregard for Vedic activities like sacrifice, with no idea of real truth, knowledge which is scant like that of an animal, he says what Prabhupada says there, is known as tamasic knowledge. So one activity is the all in all, some this mundane thing that you think is, play basketball or something, play video games, really attached to something, and think it's valuable, when actually it's just causing more entanglement. That's knowledge in the mode of ignorance. No understanding of the soul, no understanding of the Vedas, just how to try to be as comfortable as you can or enjoy something as much as you can while you're here, wasting your life, basically. Giving yourself no chance for Krishna consciousness or liberation. So that covers it here for today.